Bueno, si os parece, vamos a dar comienzo. Buenas tardes a todos y a todas. Lo primero, muchas gracias por estar hoy aquí. Esta es la segunda y última charla de una serie de presentaciones que hemos organizado desde el Donostia International Physics Center para celebrar los 60 años del CERN, del supercolisionador de partículas que está en Ginebra. En esta ocasión, el tema de la presentación está relacionado con la hibridación entre arte y ciencia. Como muchos de vosotros ya sabéis, el DIPC, al igual que el CERN, propicia la creación de espacios alternativos para el encuentro y el diálogo entre arte y ciencia. El programa Mestizajes, cuyo propósito consiste precisamente en explorar las fronteras entre arte, ciencia y humanidades, tiene muchos puntos en común con el programa de artistas en residencia del CERN, del cual nos va a hablar hoy Arianne, y de hecho se ha inspirado en parte en él. Estamos convencidos de que no hay dos culturas, sino solo una, y de que la ciencia y el arte son ambas parte de esa cultura. Es para mí un verdadero placer presentar hoy a Arianne Koek. Arianne es escritora, estratega cultural, productora creativa de la BBC, curadora y periodista de arte. Es la primera especialista cultural contratada por el CERN, donde actualmente dirige el programa de artistas en residencia. La filosofía detrás de este programa es que la colisión entre arte y física de partículas puede generar nuevas e importantes ideas y conceptos. El título de su charla de hoy es, o podríamos traducirlo como Colisionando mundos, colisiones creativas entre arte y ciencia. Arianne, please.
Buenas tardes, and thank you very much, Gustavo Schwartz and Donostia International Physics Center, for inviting me to come here to San Sebastian. Very excited to be in San Sebastian, which is an extraordinary place, and you have your own art science collisions happening at DIPC, thanks to Gustavo, who's making collisions between literature and science. But what I'm going to talk to you about is some collisions which happen at CERN in Geneva and how they happen. I sometimes say, I kind of tease the Director General of CERN and I say to him, look, you know, we got this great experiment, which is the Large Hadron Collider, which has discovered the existence of the Higgs boson, a particle which gives matter mass. But actually, we've got many, many theories about human imagination and creativity and ingenuity, but we've never discovered those, and those are the most elusive things of all. And what we're doing at CERN is making collisions between imaginations of the artists and science. So it's another great experiment, which I sometimes say to the Director General we're having. And he laughs and says, yes. So CERN is an extraordinary place, and one thing which has kind of come out of it, I'm going to start with this thing, is a choreography which is now on a world international tour. It's covered 80,000 kilometers. It opened in New York last week, and it opens in Vancouver in 2 days. It's called Quantum, and it was by our first artist in residence who came in 2012, Gilles Jobin. And I'm just going to play you a little clip so you get a kind of feel for this choreography, which came out of the ideas of science. It's not describing it or illustrating it. It's just a choreography which came out of it. So you'll have to forgive me. I'm really bad at this computing with PC. I use a Mac. that's gone off as well. Yeah, technologically not very good, so you're going to have to bear with me during this whole exercise. Quantum basically was a choreography which came out of Gilles Jobin's residency with us, which was for 3 months, and I will talk about that soon. But first of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit about CERN and what we do there. CERN is a fundamental research laboratory for science, but I've now also created it as a fundamental research laboratory for the arts and for artists of many different kinds, whether it's dancers, whether it's sculptors, whether it's data artists, hopefully soon writers, many different art forms, filmmakers, for example. And CERN is unusual in the science world because we don't create science which is applied knowledge. We just seek knowledge for its own sake. So exactly the same principles are given to the artists. They just seek creating things for its own sake and discovery there. So this is CERN. This is a kind of representation. It's a 27-kilometer ring under the Earth, and it is the world's largest man-made machine which recreates the moment just after the universe was born. It's located across 2 frontiers, across the frontier of Switzerland and France. So it's very wonderful that it's also engaging with another frontier, which is the one between arts and science. So it's very appropriate in many ways that it does that. On the ring, the 27-kilometer ring, there are 4 giant detectors. If you imagine that the Atlas detector and the CMS detector, which are diagonally opposite each other, they're like giant cameras. And when we collide particles, which you and I are made up of, they're the fundamental thing which we're made up of, we collide them in the 27-kilometer machine. And these detectors take photographs of them in essence. It's a kind of way of describing what they do. Take snapshots of the particles as they collide together and smash together and have spray coming off it. They are quite extraordinary things. And actually, if you look at them, they're the only thing of their kind made in the universe. Each one is totally unique. It's a prototype which is actually working. So in a way, it's an art form in its own right because there's no other thing like it. Each one is totally different. CERN came out of the Second World War when, after the devastation of the Second World War, scientists fled to the USA, and Europe was very concerned about it and said, we need to bring them back. And we need to show that science is for peace and for peaceful means. So CERN was created in 1954, and it's our 60th anniversary this year. The mission of CERN is to push back the frontiers of knowledge, to understand that moment just after the universe was born, to develop new technologies for doing this, train scientists and engineers of tomorrow, and unite people from all over the world. So my argument always was, you can't leave out arts from this because artists have frontiers of knowledge. They engage with the senses, which is a form of knowledge, as well as intuition. Artists engage with a lot of the new technologies, and they need training as well, and they come from different countries as well. So there's a perfect match. That was one of my arguments to the Director General of CERN. The other argument was to be a true cultural force in the 21st century, you can't just be science and technology, you have to also engage with the arts. In that way, you really are engaging with everything in the world which makes us human. Because science, technology, and the arts are expressions of what it is to be human in the world and why and how we are in the world. They just do it in different ways and have different procedures. But they're both totally driven by discovery and wanting to go further and find out more. Probably heard of CERN because in July the 4th, 2012, we discovered the so-called famous Higgs boson, which had been a theory postulated about 40 years before by 3 scientists, but in fact there were 3 other scientists who had also had thought of that theory as well. But it's always known as the Higgs, but actually it wasn't just one man, it was many other people contributed to that knowledge. As I said, CERN was founded in 1954 by 12 European states, and today there are 21 European member states which fund it. Spain was actually one of the original founders of CERN and has always been involved. CERN itself employs only 2,000 people, but there are 11,000 people from around the world who are paid by their institutions who come to CERN. So they come from 100 countries around the world, actually. And so, for example, some bits of the machinery have been supplied by Japan, have been supplied by the USA in exchange for knowledge. So there's subsidization in that way, as well as the member states paying for CERN. And that map just shows you where CERN exists. So anything which is white is where CERN doesn't exist. So it gives you an idea that there's representations all around the world. And yeah. So as I said, we push back the frontiers of knowledge. And the great thing about science is it doesn't give you the truth. In fact, we know so little. We only know about 5-6% of the universe, really. And we don't know about the other 95%. So think about it. We don't know anything at all, really. And so it's great to try and find out more. And one of the things we're trying to find out at CERN is why this material world, which we exist in, actually came into being, how it came into being. How come you're sitting on a chair and it's solid? Because when the universe was born and matter and antimatter collided, luckily there was less antimatter. We should be in an anti-material world, but instead we're in a material world in which we exist. So how did that happen and why? This just gives you an idea, really, of what we're doing. We go back in time. We sometimes say we're a super microscope because we go way back in time with our machine, which is the one you can see, that kind of pipe. That's the magnet through which, the dipoles, through which the particles are accelerated. And we go below the atom, below the molecule, we go right below the nucleus, and we go down to the fundamental particles which make us up, and those are called quarks. So very quickly, some things have come out of the engagement with looking at the universe, and that's just accident, really. So PET scans, MRI scans, for example, have come out of us investigating the universe. And imaging, medical imaging, but things like actually touch screens, mice and computers, they've all come out of CERN technology. The World Wide Web was born at CERN, that came out of it, and that's really revolutionized our life. But those all came out as a byproduct, not as the reason why CERN existed, which kind of shows the beauty of fundamental research, knowledge for its own sake. This is just a very quick thing. So we sometimes say we're the fastest racetrack on the planet because we accelerate our protons, these particles, just under the speed of light in opposite directions, and they collide 11,000 times a second, but they do that in big bunches. So actually there are 100,000 collisions per second. It makes your head fall off. I always get really kind of when I think about that. And out of that, we take all the data, but only of 100 collisions per second. We throw the rest away. It's a very empty place as well, because we create the vacuums inside the dipoles in order to allow the particles to go under the speed of light. And also to keep it cool, we have a cryogenic system where everything is minus 271 degrees Celsius. So the Large Hadron Collider, this 27-kilometer machine, is actually is one of the coldest places there is in the universe. I mean, it's even colder than outer space. But it's also the hottest place in the galaxy as well, where the protons collide, because they generate energy which is the equivalent of 1,000 million times the thing of the sun, the warmth of the sun, but in a very tiny microscopic space. So if you think about it, the human ingenuity and engineering and science and technology which has created this is absolutely incredible. And as I said, they've got these big detectors which are like giant cameras which record the collisions as they happen in the big machine. And in order to crunch all the data, we have an extensive computer system. We have a distributive grid system where computers around the world are actually crunching the data as it happens. This gives you an idea of the kind of running jobs in just 5.7 seconds, exactly what was happening at that moment. That's in gigabytes, which is kind of makes your head fall off if you knew how big that was. It's an extraordinary speed, and the crunching is happening almost in real time. So why on earth, when you've got this incredible machine, have we got the arts happening at CERN? What on earth is that doing there? Well, if you look at Picasso and the Cubist movement and the whole of the 20th century and the modernist movement in Europe, it was really highly influenced by Heisenberg and his theories of uncertainty, but also, for example, by Einstein and the theories of relativity, which really challenged our notion of the subject in the world and the object in the world. And it's really challenged it to the point saying there's no one way of looking at the world. There are many different ways. So you have, for example, also composers like Xenakis really drawing on that, or writers as well, who really draw on the notion that truth is always moving and changing. And those ideas from science have percolated through. But it's a two-way exchange. So if you look at literature, for example, this is a quote from Finnegan's Wake by the Irish author James Joyce. 3 quarks for Mr. Mark. The term quark was taken by the physicist Murray Gell-Mann. He's very literary, he's very musical, and he went, right, I'm going to have that term for the fundamental particle which makes us the whole universe. So he borrowed from literature, and that's become the fundamental particle. Now, when I went to CERN in 2008, I discovered lots and lots of artists had gone through the doors, and CERN didn't realize. They didn't know who these people were. They didn't realize that they'd had a famous photographer called Andreas Gursky going through their door, for example, or that Bjork had come, and all these artists had gone away and been inspired by CERN. And I said to CERN, look, there must be a way of showing the legacy of how particle physics in the 21st century is really influencing the arts. So you need an arts program. And if you look at this opera set, that's very direct rip-off, in a way, a copy of the Atlas detector, for example. But CERN had had something before, but it had been created by an institute in London called Signatures of the Invisible. And 8 artists being picked by the filmmaker Ken McMullen to come to CERN and engage with the science. They'd been brought to CERN. So something had gone before. And that was a very important thing for me when I did a 4-month feasibility study at CERN, trying to prove why I thought it should happen. I talked to the artists and the scientists who were involved in that program to build on that legacy. And what I discovered was one artist, a very world-famous artist, had created a piece of work which I can only describe as terrible. And I said to him, why did you create such a terrible piece of work of art? I was really direct with him, and he's a very direct man, and he said, I did it because I was so cross And I only went for one day. I had no explanation when I went there. I had nobody explaining the physics. I was just left there. It wasn't CERN's fault, but it was very much the fact that the artist was expressing that he needed somebody to explain the physics and the science, and he felt awash in this sea of 11,500 scientists. But equally, the scientists were cross because they felt artists came in and stole their ideas, and these are scientists who work together in collaborations. They're very communal. We have our own bank, we have our own travel agent at CERN, we have our own post office at CERN, and the scientists work in groups of 3,500 people together. So an artist coming in and then disappearing, they're like, who was that? What happened? And they want the artist to be part of the community. So when I created Collide at CERN, it was really important that the artists became embedded at CERN, just as I had become embedded when I was doing the feasibility study. I very much believe that artists and physicists in particular are twins, basically. They're amazing twins, because physicists divide between the theorist, who think beyond the paradigm, and the experimentalist, who then tests that theory and prove whether it happens or not, whether it exists or not. And that's what an artist does. An artist is both a theorist and experimentalist. So I think there's a very strong match also between arts and particle physics. And equally, as I said, both are looking at why we exist in the world and how we do. So when I created the program, I was determined to bring in arts, not arts which illustrated or described the science, no. And I made my life very, very difficult by doing that, because if I had, I would have got a communications budget from CERN. No, what I wanted to do was to create a cultural change and bring arts and science on exactly the same level together, where the ideas of science become springboards of the imagination for artists. Now, that has always happened for millennia, but I really wanted it to be expressed in an official program, in a science institution, to really create change. And one way of doing it is also to kind of explain what you're doing in the language of science. So what I would call curation or selection, for the scientists I called peer review, because they understood it. And what I also very much was keen to do was to show that I wasn't going to influence the process. Because the scientists I talked to said, anybody can be an artist, but not everybody can be a scientist. Anybody can be an artist, it's just who you know. And I went, no. There's a whole history of art, there's a whole excellence in the artistic process which has to be judged. We have peer review in the arts, just like you do in science. So it was very important that we created an international competition with a jury, with scientists also on the jury, as well as artists on the jury, to select the artists. So it wasn't seen to be personal prejudice, and that was really keen. So I created a policy for CERN called Great Arts for Great Science. It does what it says, really. It's to bring in artists who show excellence, whether they're young or old or middle, at the same level as the scientists, and to create an equal platform. And again, it was important. I kind of also thought it was good that I didn't put the load of the artists finding the money. I found the money for the artists to come to CERN, so they came already funded. So there was no kind of second-class citizen fact about it. Also created a cultural board at CERN, made up of people from the arts, leading people from the arts to bring in knowledge, like Beatrix Roof, who was the director of the Kunsthalle in Zurich, and has now moved to a big Dutch museum, as well as Michael Dozer in the middle, who's a world expert on antimatter. And we have creative artistic patrons who are all artists who've come to CERN and been inspired. So they're not people who just saying, oh, it's a great idea. They're people who've been impacted by it, like Jacques Herzog, for example, the architect, or Mariko Mori, the Japanese-American artist. So Collide at CERN was an artist residency program which was launched in 2011, and it's got two strands, one which is funded by the city and canton of Geneva, and the other one which is funded by private sponsors with some little bit of prize money from Ars Electronica Linz. And it's an open international competition, judged by a jury with prize money and living costs and travel. And it's very much about having the artist paired with a scientist. They have to live on site. Sometimes the artist goes, oh my gosh, is this where I've got to be? They're put in an office just like a scientist, so they live just like a scientist. And they engage with the scientists in many different ways. And you can follow their progress on blogs, which we do. Our first partner, as I said, was Ars Electronica Linz. And with them, we did a big international symposium in 2011 to announce the Collide at CERN program. And it was a big conference which looked at CERN and said, is this a model for the future? Is this how society should be? And it was kind of critical and engaging. And it's the first time CERN had ever opened up its borders and engaged with an arts symposium and a big conference. And the first winner of our competition was an extraordinary artist called Julius von Bismarck. We had 400 entries from 44 countries. Julius is like an artist terrorist. He's great fun. Basically, he believes in kind of confronting our notions of perception and reality, our perception of reality, which is exactly what particle physics does. And you see him here with a camera. He went to press conferences and pointed his camera at photographers. And when they went back to expose their negatives, they found mysterious things on top, like the dove of peace on top of Chairman Mao. So in that way, he was saying, we're controlled by the media, but I can control the media too. So he was making a very strong social statement of disturbance and interference. You saw the choreography by our first choreographer in residence, Gilles Jobin. Gilles was interesting because he left school at 16 and he came to CERN and was terrified initially because physicists, when they sit around talking about beam dump and wimpzillas and talking in this kind of strange language, he didn't understand it. And I said to him, actually, it doesn't matter if you don't understand. Actually, you have an amazing knowledge, and your knowledge is embodied knowledge. It's the knowledge of your body, and it's inside you, and you should be responding with your gut and your instinct when you hear scientists talk. So when a scientist said to him, gravity is the weakest force, it really revolutionized his way of looking at dance. Because as a dancer, he'd been trained to always think of the ground being stable and gravity being a really strong pull. When he discovered it was the weakest force and that the body is in perpetual motion inside us, and that inside us we have collisions which mimic the beginning of the universe, his whole world exploded. Totally. His whole choreographic training exploded, and quantum came out of that, for example. Now, every single artist is matched with a scientist. I do a bit of speed dating, that's what I call it. I basically choose a scientist who I think will take the artist further, and choose an artist who I think will take the scientist further. So it's a mutual matchmaking. And this partnership is between Julius von Bismarck and a specialist on hidden worlds called James Wells. And they're always paired with the expectation that they create nothing. All they do is talk together. Now, that is very important that you have that expectation, and I do that as a political statement, because I believe in this society we've become too product-driven, we've become too time-driven, and we've lost trust in artists. But an artist exists to create and make. A work of art takes as long as it will take, and I know that any artist who comes to CERN will make something. It will just take as long as it takes. And these two, whilst they did create something actually during the residency, are still creating things, and we're creating a public artwork which will be shown in Athens and will be a comment on civilization in 2016. This is our one of our artists in residence. He was meant to be with us for 3 months, and he looks like a miner, doesn't he? He's equipped with a helmet, he's got a dosimeter as well as a camera, a dosimeter to check the radiation. And the reason why is he lived in here. He lived inside there for 10 months filming. He became part of the team who were putting in the central bit, the pixel detector. He fell so in love with CERN, and the scientists fell so in love with him, that basically he stayed with us for 10 months. And he comes back every single month, actually. So I paired him with this scientist with the beard, who is an engineer on the pixel detector. And the pixel detector is the very heart of that big machine which I just showed you, which actually takes the snapshots of the invisible particles. Because I couldn't think of anything more poetic than a filmmaker taking pictures, being apprenticed to the detector, which takes pictures. It just seemed perfect to me. And then it gets a bit more perfect because Jan was very special because he loved going down to that giant camera and confronting it with Super 8, really old film, 15mm film, and even a camera obscura. He was down there with a camera obscura. So he confronted the latest in technology with the oldest technologies of recording. We're very excited to see what happens with his documentary. And when I say documentary, it will be like no other documentary. He's an artist, so he would change everything, and he very much does time travel in his pieces. It would be a very personalized, almost Walter Mitty art piece. And he's in the editing room now, and maybe it will come out next year. We shall see. Anyway, also what we do at CERN is we do naughty things with the artists, which is really great. We intervene in the spaces of CERN in the hallowed library. So this is a dancer just popping out of a shelf with a very appropriate book saying, "Don't make me think." And they did this intervention unannounced. One day we went into the CERN library. We didn't announce that there were 3 dancers. CERN library, very serious, very quiet. Dancers were absolutely intent on dancing and also being invisible when they danced. I did say, "How can you do that?" But they said, "We will do it." Anyway, the extraordinary thing is, here they are dancing, and they were actually somersaulting in front of a physicist who was studying, who didn't notice. It was quite incredible. It was absolutely mad. And this image, this photograph, went viral around the world. It was in the Huffington Post, in the Guardian. And in fact, I think this is a meditation. This piece, really, this photograph shows you the sublime focus of a physicist and their passion, as well as the sublime focus of an artist and dancer and their passion in dancing and being invisible and fulfilling their missions. So 2 people, 2 forms of people with their mission. But people did notice when the dancers started plunging into books and throwing books all over the library, and that was like 2.5 hours later, which was great fun. And we really loved doing these interventions. We also kidnapped 30 scientists. Julius von Bismarck and I kidnapped 30 scientists and held them hostage underground for 2 hours in the dark, because we thought, these scientists who look at the invisible, how do they feel when they are invisible? And what do they see when they can't see anything? So we locked them up. And after that, we got loads and loads of people saying, "When's the next kidnapping? Can we be kidnapped?" So what we do is many kind of crazy experiments at CERN with the artists, many interventions. Here is the sound artist, Bill Fontana, and he's with the, oh my goodness, he's with the big machine worth, I forgot, I think it's 7 billion euros, this machine. It's the world's most expensive machine, and he's playing with it. Well, we let him down there. The Director General obviously approved of it. And he's doing a sound sculpture, turning the Large Hadron Collider into the world's biggest musical instrument by playing the sounds of the Large Hadron Collider before it was switched off back to itself when it was switched off. I mean, he wouldn't be able to be underground when it was switched off. We also played it the sounds of the sea, and a physicist said to me that was the most poetic thing you could do, because half of the Large Hadron Collider was actually transported by sea from America. So it's like taking it back to its home, back to its birthplace. And all these things are possible because I, as a curator, I curate the experience of the physicists at CERN. I select the scientists they engage with. I also know the artist's work, and I know what they will be interested in and will take them further. And I throw in surprises as well. I work very, very closely with the artists and also act as a bridge of translation sometimes. But as you can see, we're very playful. This is a Harvard physicist listening to a piece. And actually, as part of her physics degree, she danced her thesis, and her thesis counted as part of her degree, and she's now gone on to Cambridge University in the UK and is going on to Princeton afterwards. So she's a high-flying physicist who actually is a choreographer and a dancer and did that as part of her degree at Harvard. But I often say that what we're also bringing scientists is a way of engaging with their work in a very different way. So Christoph Remser, listening to what I would have thought was the world's most boring thing, the power supply at CERN, he's getting very, very excited about the power supply at CERN. And as I've said many times before, one of the scientists who's actually guarded the place where the protons leave before they go on their 27-kilometer journey, when Bill put the sound equipment on it, and he heard the protons being propelled through the magnets, he actually burst into tears and said, "Oh, I've never ever thought of my machine like that." And he really related to it. So it's that whole thing about the arts really reaching the hearts and parts which science and intellect alone can't reach, because it has such extraordinary power through the senses. So, as I said, we're really about process and discovery and creative collisions at CERN. And I say that there's going to be no outcome, but there has been, of course there has been. So those lamps, which you saw as part of the dance piece, actually came out of the first artist in residency and have shown in Taipei, have opened the art fair in Berlin. It's called Versuchen zu kreisen. And every 78th turn, they come into synchronization with each other. Otherwise, they're out of synchronization with each other. And it's an extraordinary meditative installation. Also out of it came, as I said, in 2012, the dance piece Quantum, which also won a major international prize, the Hermes Foundation Award, because it brought Julius and Gilles' choreography together. And after it had its world premiere at CERN, which it had last year, danced above the very spot where the Higgs boson was discovered, it has gone on major international tour. It's touring around the world, 80,000 kilometers since 2013, 10 countries, 3 continents. It opened actually in New York last week, and it opens in Vancouver, not tomorrow, but the next day. And then it's going down to Brazil, for example, and going to Peru. So what we're talking about really is the creative spirit, and I really believe in the necessity for the unknown, for artists and scientists to go out of their depth. If you think about it, the way you learnt to walk was by falling down. So it's only by going into the unknown and testing ourselves that we really go further, and we take culture further and ourselves further. And that is absolutely what this project is about. I've also created another bit of arts at CERN. So we have the residency program, and we have a 1-month research program with 2 different countries a year, inviting an artist through international competition to come to CERN just for a month. And those countries fund that award. But we also have another bit of the program, which is the Visiting Artists Award. And you would think, what is this doing? And the Visiting Artists Award. We have had invited people like Wolfgang Tillmans has been with us. Next week we have Anselm Kiefer who's a famous German artist with us. Esa-Pekka Salonen, the conductor, is with us, for example. But also this fashion designer called Iris van Herpen, her summer-spring collection, which was shown at the Paris fashion show two weeks ago, or 1 week ago, in fact, was called Magnetic Motion and was inspired by her visit at CERN and the fact that the magnets are 20,000 times stronger than the Earth. And she studied magnet patterns. And this actually went into vogue as well. And she's coming back, like all the visiting artists do, they come back and revisit us to carry on creating and getting new inspiration. This is another visiting artist who we're working with, who's a Dutch filmmaker who's creating a science fiction opera called Symmetry. And I'm just going to play you the teaser for it. And in it, you will hear some physicists talking about science and arts, which will give you some further clues as to what we're up to.
Well, I would like to think that, at the base there is a similar impulse, that we're all of us trying to answer Gauguin's questions. What are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going?
I think CERN represents kind of the biggest machine that man's ever made.
There's more about that place, just the building. With that kind of feeling, you want to be prepared in order to face it.
You develop tools, you develop techniques to make visible what you can't see. And artists often do the same thing. They often have a way of looking at the world that is different from what other people see. And in that sense, I think they're also like scientists. A lot of the stuff that you find out is sitting right there in front of you and just nobody pays attention until somebody comes along and says, yes, but look, there, right there. Why? Why is that?
If we want to understand what happened, we need to think beyond the conventional ideas of space and time.
So that's another project we're working on, and I've done exactly the same as I did before I closed the computer. Oh no, and even worse, we're going to have to go all the way through all the slides. Excellent. Okay, I've found the one. So that's the ending of the opera. It's going to probably end up in the Atacama Desert in Chile. That's the idea. So they're getting ready to film there with the international soprano, Claren McFadden. So we also do lectures around the world about movement, for example, movement from an arts point of view and from a scientist's point of view, or the invisible, for example. And the visiting artists have created many new projects, like Rambert Dance Company created a new project 2 weeks ago, which had its world premiere, called Strange Charm of Mother Nature. And it had a new composition, a new piece called Quark Dancers in it. So we're creating all these different things. We're also working with the Polish artist Gorzka Mikuga on a new piece which he's going to be presenting in Geneva, as well as another opera. Actually, we're working on another opera with Arnaud Nordgraf. So there are many projects we're doing. This is another of our current artists in residence, who is the artist Ryoji Akida, and he works with data. And this piece is called Supersymmetry, and it looks at the experience of science and then the experiments of science. And I will just attempt again to show you a little bit of a trailer so you can have a sense of his work. So this is a massive installation in a room. and it opened in Japan in April. He came to us because every artist comes to us 3 months before he started his residency. He had thought of this idea before he started the residency, but in his induction visit, it inspired him so much that he started playing with the ideas inside this piece. And this piece is going to change as it tours internationally according to the responses he has during his residency with us. He split his residency in 2 parts. It's split in terms of he was with us in July and he comes back with us in February. So it's a case of watch this space with that piece. But really what will come directly out of the residency, as he said, will be something which nobody will be able to legislate for. And that's the whole point. It's about going into the unknown and something unexpected happen. And I would, to tell you the truth, I will be very, very surprised if he does anything connected with data, because it's too obvious. So what do the scientists get out of this? Gustavo quite rightly said, your presentation, because I talked earlier at DIPC, your presentation misses this out. It's too true, I do. So I put this slide in for Gustavo. And quite right too. What they've said to me they get out of it, of course they don't get an arts piece. Some of them actually end up becoming performers and really engaging in theatre and really discovering their performing self. What they get out of it is encounters with different forms of knowledge making and different approaches and different approaches to discovery as well, because artists have different ways of making knowledge and discovering knowledge, through the body, through the senses, through the intellect, but also through detours and not through the linear way. And it has had impact on their daily lives. I mean, it's very interesting. Normally the scientists at CERN stare in one direction. They go, lab, food, they're like that. But the minute I hung a sculpture by Anthony Gormley, or I turned their restaurant into a live dance rehearsal space, they started going, woo, and they started looking everywhere. So new ways of looking also have a scientific connection with new neuron connections. So who knows what will be happening out of their science when that happens. And it also is well-being and socialization and play as well. And I'm a great believer in the power of the imagination. I think knowledge is fantastic, but I do believe imagination takes us further and embraces the entire world, as Albert Einstein himself believed. And as I said, what we're creating is ideas of science as springboards of the imagination, and we're creating a laboratory of the imagination at CERN, as well as a laboratory for fundamental knowledge. So the value to CERN, you might ask, well, what does CERN get out of it other than me kidnapping lots of scientists, distracting them, fundraising externally for things, distracting the message of science? Well, what they get out of it, I think, is they show that CERN is an open organisation, that they're creating something better for their workers other than crunching data all the time. And it's actually inspired new ideas at CERN. So, for example, in 2 months' time, there's a hackathon where the physicists at CERN are creating new applications for the NGOs and in some of the war-torn countries, where they're using their knowledge to actually help war-torn countries. And it also creates new ways of seeing and shows that CERN is visionary in many different ways. So that, in brief, is the Arts at CERN programme. And I'm here, and you can ask me any questions at all about this programme, which started in 2011. First artists came 2012, and we're now in 2014. Yeah.
Bueno, lo primero, muchas gracias, Arianne, por tu charla y por incluir el comentario que habíamos comentado en la comida acerca de qué podían sacar el limpio a los científicos de esta interacción. Bueno, tenemos un tiempo para preguntas y comentarios, así que si algún valiente se anima a comenzar. Sí, Arantxa.
Thank you. Maybe I will ask in English. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. It was really fantastic to hear you. I have two very practical questions. One is, how do you choose the scientist, or how do you convince them to work with an artist in this matching you do? I mean, I'm talking about persons. And this is the first question. And the second one, very practical also, it's about money. Do you
yes, money. Yeah.
Sorry. Do you pay the artist? How much do they get paid? Do you also maybe pay the scientists, as they do in other programs? That would be the two questions. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so how do I choose the scientists? Well, I do an open call for scientists to take part in the program. Or I sometimes actually nab a scientist who I meet. So I met a scientist in a pantomime wielding a sword wearing tights. And he started talking to me. I thought, gosh, you're a really great communicator. You're really good. And he had this kind of incredible openness and curiosity. So I just grabbed him and I said, Tom, I really want you to be an inspiration partner. Will you want to be it? And I actually matched him with Ryoji Akida. The way I match is actually quite sophisticated because 3 months before the artist comes in residency, as I said, they come to us for 4 days and are introduced to different scientists. And afterwards, I talk to the scientists and say, what do you think about that artist? How would you like to work with them? How would they take you further? And then I ask the same question to the artist about the scientist. And then I have my own thoughts because I'm a producer and I'm used to matching people who will take each other further. Now, some artists will say, oh, I really like that scientist. And the scientist will say, I really like that artist. I'm not going to name names, but there was one artist who chose somebody exactly like him. And I went, no, sorry, you're not going to be matched with that person. He said, can't I have two? So I have that one. I went, no, he's too like you. You need somebody who's going to really take you further. I'm sorry. So he was matched with this other scientist. I'm not going to give away who it is. And they have taken each other further, and it was totally perfect. So it's a marriage made in many different ways. Now, the money question. Okay, so I fundraise for the artists to come. The scientists don't get paid extra for participating. They just have to have the willingness to participate. They're funded by their home institutions to be at CERN. And they do it in their spare time. They do it as an extra, in fact. The artists get paid. They get a stipend or a prize money, which is 5,000 Swiss francs a month. They also get their travel fees, subsistent costs. So I'm basically raising for each artist, because Switzerland is incredibly expensive. So this is going to sound like a lot of money, okay? But Switzerland is horrific in terms of expenses. I raise 60,000 Swiss, which is about 50,000 euros per artist. And that's for the residency program, and for the research program, I raise slightly less than that. But that's all externally fundraised for.
Sí. ¿Más preguntas?
You obviously work in the arts, otherwise you wouldn't be asking this question. Two very fundamental questions, matching and funding. What do you do out of interest?
I run a program called Improbable Connections that connect artists and organizations.
I've heard of Improbable Connections. Okay. Congratulations on the program. Yeah.
My question is about, you explained extremely well how do you connect artists and the funding and all that, the scientists and the funding and all that, but how do you choose the artists?
Oh God, I sometimes think that's the easy bit. We do an open call and we select them. What I'm looking for from the artists is curiosity, almost humility. So for example, Bill Fontana is a very well-known sound sculptor. And in his 2-minute video, which his son said, "That is rubbish, Dad, you're not submitting that." Because basically it was just Bill standing in front of some Venetian blinds. It wasn't arty at all. And this was his testimony as to why he wanted to come to CERN. He just said, "Oh, I feel like a kid. I feel as though I'm just beginning my career. I've got so much to explore. I want to go out of my depth. I know nothing about particle physics. And I just want to see what I can find. I have no idea what I could find." Well, to have a world-class artist saying that and being so open to explore and discover, I thought, gosh, you know, that's wonderful. So we chose him because of that, for example. So I'm always looking for openness and curiosity and a willingness not to describe the science or illustrate it, but somebody who really is conceptually driven and also will do new work, has that potential to do new work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I just want to make 2 small clarifications for the audience.
Oh no, it's me and my popularization of science.
No.
I can feel it.
More important than that. It's not true that Spain was one of the founding fathers of CERN.
Oh, was it not? I thought it
No.
was. Okay.
CERN, as you rightly say, was created in 1954.
Okay.
And the convention was signed by 12 countries. That is precisely right. But Spain joined CERN in 1961.
Oh, sorry.
But stayed there only for a short period of time, until 1968.
Okay.
And then joined back in 1983.
Okay.
So we had been only 2/3 of the time full members of CERN. And the second clarification, also to avoid misunderstanding, is one of your beautiful slides. You mentioned that 50% of this installation came from the other side of the Atlantic. That is not right. The contribution of the United States was extremely small for the construction of the machine, less than 2 or 3%. The thing was essentially built by the European countries, by the CERN member states. So this is just for the sake of clarification.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Very much indeed. I suppose because CERN, Spain is so present at CERN, it's kind of incredible that I assumed you were. So thank you.
Spain is a big country.
Yeah.
And in that sense, we are now the 5th contributors to the CERN budget with 8.5%. So we are now a big country. We have built in the last 30 years a very competitive community, but has been really difficult, as you can imagine.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sí.
Thank you.
¿Más preguntas? Aquí, Luisa.
Sí, bueno, yo también, en primer lugar, agradecerle su presentación, que ha sido magnífica e inspiradora. Mi pregunta no es tan concreta, es un poco más abstracta. Yo creo que hemos visto que efectivamente hay una gran influencia del entorno científico para los artistas. A mí me interesa sobre todo la influencia de los artistas en los científicos o en la manera de ver ciencia. Y mi pregunta es, ¿cree usted que hay alguna transformación, diríamos, que podemos esperar una influencia en un sentido de introducir en la ciencia preocupaciones más humanísticas o más cercanas a la experiencia diaria de la gente por el hecho de juntar artistas con científicos? ¿Puede cambiar realmente la manera de hacer ciencia por estar cerca de los artistas?
There was a big study in the US looking at science Nobel Prize winners, and it discovered that most of the Nobel Prize winners actually engaged with the arts and had an artistic engagement. So that's one piece of scientific proof, so-called scientific proof. The other proof, I guess, is just from what scientists say to me. So like the theorist James Wells said, I know my experience with Julius has changed the way I look at my theory and will really change the way I do it, but I can't tell you how. And other scientists have said, I now realize sometimes that the detours are very important when I'm creating an experiment, that actually a detour can give me more clues than me going in a straightforward way. But it's very difficult to prove. That's all I can say. And all I can say is that what the scientists say to me, that actually it makes them in touch with being human again, and gives them a human context to their world. So it's all anecdotal. You can't actually prove it. It's not like you don't have a work of art which can prove it. All you can say is what the scientists say. And I was talking to Gustavo about that earlier, and we were joking, why don't we just wire them all up like lab rats and see the neurons firing in the brain and show that their neurons are firing in different ways when they engage with the arts? Well, I don't want to turn scientists into lab rats. Yeah.
Me voy a permitir agregar un comentario en relación con esta pregunta, porque, bueno, incluso es algo que hemos puesto en la obra de teatro que te había comentado antes en la entrevista. Lo que dice uno de los personajes, dice, el método científico permite verificar hipótesis, pero no formular hipótesis. La que formula las hipótesis es la intuición. Entonces yo creo que en ese sentido la intuición se puede alimentar de diferentes fuentes. Y yo creo que no hay que despreciar ninguna de las fuentes que puedan, de alguna manera, provocar esa intuición, ¿no? Luego, después, esas intuiciones habrá que verificarlas. Y allí es donde entra el método científico. ¿Más preguntas? Sí, por favor.
Hello. Thank you for your conference. Just one small question. You said from reality, there is a part we know and a part we don't know, which is much bigger than the part we know, right? There is the part of reality we are still investigating. That's what theorist physicists do, right?
Yeah, there's 94% we don't know.
Exactly. And
6%.
From that part that we don't know, there is a part of it which we cannot even imagine. I mean, especially or in time, right? And so there comes art and artists trying to help scientists in new perspectives or twisted ideas or whatever, right? But you said you didn't want your artists to illustrate science. You didn't want it, the program, you didn't want this program to be an illustrative part of what the scientists did at CERN. But don't you think you could help with artists' representations to illustrate or to show or to bring closer to people as me, who cannot imagine in how geometrically or in time the ideas that these physicists have? Don't you think it could be illustrative? But you said you didn't want it to be illustrative, so...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are different ways of approaching it. So CERN does have an outreach program where we work with photographers, or we have comic book illustrators, for example, who illustrate and describe the science. So absolutely, artists play a very, very key role in communicating and illustrating science. It's just this program is about not enslaving the arts to the science, but showing a holistic vision of culture where they're both on the same platform. But those two programs coexist happily together. But yes, yeah.
¿Más preguntas o comentarios?
Good evening. Is this program of matching science and artists originally created by the CERN, or in that case, is that being copied by other laboratories around the world, or being shown interest on it?
Thank you. Yeah. I don't know how to answer that. I mean, if you look at the whole history of art-science interactions in the USA, for example, in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, there were very strong movements with artists and scientists working together. For example, at the Bell Laboratories, a very famous experiment. So there's a whole history of this happening. So I wouldn't say it has never happened before, absolutely not. This particular program is created specifically for CERN and was initiated by CERN. And the mission of putting the artists and the scientists on the same level has inspired other activity. So, for example, in South Korea, they now have a program which follows and matches that very, very exactly. And there are many other labs who are copying it as well. For example, in Chile, they're copying it as well, very directly, the same model and the same process. So, yeah.
¿Más preguntas o algún comentario? Sí. Espera el micrófono, por favor.
Hi. Hello. Okay. Thanks for the presentation first. It shows you are really passionate about this, so it's great. My question is about my cousin. He's an artist also. He's becoming more abstract. You know, he paints white on white and stuff like that. And sometimes I don't really understand. So many times we end up talking about what is art. We never reach a clear conclusion. So here we are talking about colliding worlds. So my question is, could you give us a scientific definition of what art is?
Oh dear. I'm not a scientist, so I can't, unfortunately. Gustavo, scientist, sitting next to me. How would you define it?
Te voy a responder.
Put this on, check what you're saying.
Hay una frase de Julio Cortázar que a mí me gusta mucho y que la uso en estas situaciones, que es, él suele decir, la poesía es todo aquello que queda fuera de la definición de poesía, ¿no? Es muy difícil definir las cosas cuando las cosas son complejas. En general podemos dar definiciones precisas de cosas simples, pero definir cosas, incluso la ciencia, o sea, definir qué es ciencia no es sencillo. Se organizan congresos enteros con gente discutiendo durante años para ver qué es ciencia y no se llega a una conclusión clara, ¿no? Hay cosas que sí son y hay cosas que no son, pero hay otras que están ahí que no se sabe, ¿no? Y yo creo que en el caso del arte es exactamente lo mismo. Y lo mismo pasa el otro día en una charla en Cucha también con la definición de qué es vida, ¿no? De qué cosas son seres vivos. Y no hay una definición que encaje con todos los hechos observables, ¿no? Uno coge una definición y siempre hay algo que queda fuera de eso. Entonces yo creo que cuando las cosas son realmente complejas, intentar una definición precisa es casi una pérdida de tiempo, te diría. Sí, Luisa, por favor.
Yo sí, dado que nosotros hemos estado trabajando juntos, una escritora y un científico, a la pregunta que se hace, sí me gustaría decir una cosa. Quizá lo que ha caracterizado siempre las relaciones con la ciencia y con el arte es que el arte ha querido muchas veces explicarse como ciencia, por ejemplo la literatura, ¿no? Decir que no es una cuestión de pura inspiración, sino que tiene sus reglas, etc. O sea, ha habido desde el comienzo, desde Aristóteles, ese deseo de alguna manera crear una tierra firme también como ciencia. Y lo mismo la ciencia ha buscado casi formas de legitimidad también en el arte, utilizando un vocabulario afín, hablando de belleza, etcétera, ¿no? Yo creo que lo interesante es que siempre han buscado una tensión en el otro, constantemente desde que esas disciplinas existen, esos puentes, y quizá este programa se llama Mestizaje por eso. A mí me parece interesante no llegar nunca a la definición quieta, sino a esa búsqueda siempre de tener lo otro. Y a mí me parece que en esa definición entran, ¿no? Vemos muchas veces, yo estaba mirando esas imágenes de algo científico y estaba pensando en la belleza, estaba pensando en cosas como hubiera mirado un cuadro o el cielo, me da igual. Y lo mismo en la literatura o en otras artes se busca también pensar que hay reglas, que hay normas, que hay constantes que se pueden repetir y reproducir. A mí me parece interesante esa tensión entre ambas.
Sí. ¿Alguna otra pregunta o comentario?
Sí.
Sí, por favor.
Bueno, yo una muy simple porque no llego a más. Si esta máquina, que es para un choque de partículas, este programa de artistas con científicos dentro de un sitio donde pienso que la ciencia tiene un nivel más o menos máximo, esto es un proyecto, pero de ello se pueden sacar proyectos completamente diferentes. ¿Y a qué va? ¿Va simplemente a la ciencia o la ciencia unida con el individuo, o sea, con el planeta, con los que vivimos, para ser más coherentes y ir a más en nuestra inteligencia o nuestro ser? Es la máquina la que se ha puesto, pero ¿para qué se ha puesto solo? ¿Para la ciencia o la ciencia y el hombre?
To answer that question and is extremely well qualified, is the best qualified person in the room. He's on his way.
No, yo creo que hay que intentar evitar confusiones. O sea, esta ciencia, esta máquina se ha hecho siguiendo la tradición de por qué se han hecho máquinas similares, más sencillas, desde hace cerca de 80 años. Porque yo creo que una de las cosas que distingue al ser humano de los dos seres vivos es la curiosidad, el deseo de aprender cosas no conocidas, explorar nuevos territorios. Y realmente esta máquina, que es, como se ha dicho, la más compleja y la más grande, pero no la más costosa, porque la más costosa es la Estación Espacial Internacional, que ha costado 30 veces más que el LHC, esta máquina lo que quiere es insistir, profundizar en el deseo que tiene el hombre civilizado de conocer nuevas cosas. Lo que ocurre es que la ciencia, cuando progresa, produce resultados que desafían la intuición humana. Y como resultado de estas investigaciones se producen cosas, se producen descubrimientos que afectan otras ciencias, pero que afectan sobre todo la vida de los individuos. Y el ejemplo que ha citado Arianne, uno de ellos es el World Wide Web, el WWW. Eso es una creación científica que es un producto colateral del deseo que tenemos en conocer realmente cómo se ha generado, cuáles son las leyes que gobiernan el universo, la naturaleza última de la materia, las fuerzas fundamentales, etcétera, etcétera. Hay otros muchos ejemplos, dos los cité yo ayer en la conferencia que di en Cucha. Cuando a final de los años 20 Dirac propone la idea de la existencia de antipartículas, de antimateria, la gente pensaba que eso era un ejercicio de puro interés académico, intelectual. No es cierto. Los que hoy hemos tenido que utilizar por una razón u otra la tomografía por emisión de positrones, nos damos cuenta que la antimateria juega hoy un papel esencial en los tratamientos médicos. Lo mismo ocurre con los aceleradores de partículas, de los cuales el LHC es su exponente más sofisticado. Son instrumentos que se crearon hace 80 años, se inventaron hace 80 años para escudriñar la naturaleza última de la materia. Hoy en el mundo hay del orden de 25.000 aceleradores de partículas. Solo unas decenas se utilizan para investigación fundamental. La mayoría tienen utilizaciones industriales y médicas. Por lo tanto, no nos confundamos. Se construyen estas máquinas por el deseo de saciar la curiosidad de los seres civilizados, pero los efectos colaterales tienen una importancia extraordinaria para la sociedad y para otras ciencias. Gracias.
Gracias por esta explicación tan detallada. ¿Más preguntas? Bueno, si no hay más preguntas, agradecemos de nuevo a Arianne. Y bueno. Perdón, un último comentario, me olvidé de hacer la publicidad de la casa. No olvidéis que vamos a tener más charlas de este tenor en noviembre, 18 y 19 de noviembre. Tenemos un nuevo encuentro sobre literatura y ciencia. En particular, vamos a ver el rol de la razón, la intuición y la imaginación en literatura y en ciencia, así que os esperamos a todos por allí. Gracias.